Welcome to the Everyday GSD podcast. Today's special guest is Scott Narreau, and you can correct me in a little bit, but I've known Scott for many, many years. We grew up together in the Adirondack Mountains, but I do want to do a little bio on you, and I also want to thank the Grand Hyatt, Brian, who let us use this establishment for the podcast today. So we are obviously in the Mile High City in Denver. Scott's from Rouse's Point, New York. Grew up in the Adirondack Mountains, my stomping grounds. Former Navy EOD diver, Explosives Ordnance Disposal, if you don't know what that means. You joined the Navy at 18 years old. You got out when you were 24, circa, I say that. You did it 6 years. You did NATO operations in the Netherlands, Turkey, Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Spain, Portugal. Fuck, I can keep going, but we won't. You're currently the program manager for the state of Colorado for Explosive Regulation Program. And you were the Amusement Ride Safety Regulation Program Monitor. Probably fucking that up, but that's okay. You're a father of an 18-month-old named Emma and a 3.5-year-old little angel named Van. I always...
Emmy and Van.
Yeah, when I read my shit, it fucks me up. And obviously you're married to a rock star wife named Taylor, who is also a nurse, always helping people, of course. And I think you guys met... She was a White River rafting instructor or a guide.
Yes.
And then obviously it went uphill for you.
Yeah.
You're an avid skier, snowboarder, self-proclaimed landlocked surfer, and most recently your last trip was in Peru and Mexico City. We might dive into that a little bit, but we'll see how time is. Listen, first of all, I want to thank you, Scott, for being on the show. Again, I've known you for years, and I've wanted you on the show for a while, but we just couldn't make it work. And I said, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to come out to Denver and you're going to be here. And because you live about, 2.5 hours from here?
Yep.
Or
2.5 hours west of here.
What's the town you live in?
Newcastle, which is just west of Glenwood Springs.
Okay, we don't want to give too many details. We don't want any creepers coming out there to try to attack you or something. But we are going to have some drinks on the show because fortunately the bartenders here are very kind to us. So I want to talk about but I want to go through a bunch of shit with you, but I really want to talk about the time that you decided that you wanted to go in the Navy and the process that was like for you, and then, some of the NATO operations you did in the Navy, and then we'll go through, the transition through life to where you are today in a pretty fucking cool job. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely fortunate, how everything plays out, for me at least, ending up managing the explosive regulation program for the state of Colorado.
Yeah, it's badass.
That's a sweet job,
it's a really sweet job.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate.
Okay, so you're a little kid. You're like 10 years old playing hockey with me, and boy, we had some fun back in Rouse's. Shout out to Rouse's Point and all the people from the Adirondacks listen to the show.
Beautiful place. Isn't it?
It's pretty rare that we can have two of us in the same room talking about how great that area is. But so you're a little kid and you wanted to go in the Navy, or was this an afterthought? Like you hear about people that are like, I want to be an EOD guy, or I want to be a Navy SEAL.
Yep.
Or thank you, sir. Good man right here.
Thank you so much.
So, you hear these stories and people are like, I watched a movie, I watched Rambo and I wanted to be a Green Beret, or, I watched, Navy SEAL movie, I want to be a Navy SEAL. Or so is this something that you want to do, or is this something that just ended up happening?
Yeah, it ended up happening because I moved down to Florida when I was 15.
Right, I remember.
Based on a failing marriage, my parents' failing marriage. And
we could just say a marriage that wasn't working out.
Yeah. So I got uprooted, for better or worse, and went down to St. Petersburg, Florida. So that transition was hard for me, I think, trying to adjust, and it was just a different world. And it was interesting in high school at that point where they had changed everything. You remember the days where if you didn't show up for school, you had to bring a note from your mom.
I do.
Or something.
Yeah.
And
why were you not there?
Yeah, why you were absent from class. So down there they changed. They're like, we no longer need a note from your mom while you're absent.
So you stopped going.
Yeah, exactly. So they're like, if you don't show up for 9 days total in the semester, you're done. Or you're not going to pass. And that was right about the time I had secured my first car, and I was driving myself to high school, and I would park at high school and sit out there and just not want to go in. And I would just I was near the beach, and I'm just a water person. I've always been a water person. So I was always wrestling with like, do I go in and sit in class, or I can just go to the beach right now? You know? And so I was constantly choosing the beach over the class. And after I like passed my 9th day, it was like, why go back if I'm already failed?
Right.
And it just,
and just to be clear, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to. People who that are listening right now are like, okay, so you weren't going to class, but for people who don't know you, you're an extremely intelligent individual, and we'll talk about when you took your GSD. No, GSD is the GED. Yeah, when you took your GED and then you took your ASVAB. But we're going to go to that later. But I just want to clarify, just because you weren't going to traditional high school, that did not change the your everyday GSD mentality of what needed to get done in your brain.
Oh, dude, like I applied for every job under the sun, you know, while I wasn't going to high school. I think the funniest one was like I applied to be the manager of a lingerie shop when I was 17 years old.
Look at Justin.
And I got the interview.
Pick me.
I worked at an Express during Christmas one year so I could sell clothes to women, so I get
it. We're cut from the same cloth over here. So it was just a hilarious interview. You know, they're just like, you know, trying to be serious but not taking me seriously, and I'm just I was 17, but I always looked like 4 years younger than I was even then. You know, I looked like I was 14 years old, and they're just like trying not to laugh at me. So I was always pretty industrious, like trying to figure out a way to make money. You know, just not like I didn't have my thinking straight at the time. You know, I was lacking a father figure for a while. And, you know, just aimless, basically. Busy in my mind.
But you turned that around because then at some point you ended up coming back to Plattsburgh.
Yep.
Or was it Ross? You came back to Plattsburgh,
back to Plattsburgh.
And did you end up going back to Plattsburgh? Did you end up going to Plattsburgh High School for part of a year? No,
because I was done.
Yeah.
I was definitely done by that time. I came back when I turned 18. And everybody.
So this is after you took your GED, but you really didn't take it.
Yeah, exactly. I had taken the practice test in Florida.
Yeah, and you got like a fucking 100 on it.
Yeah, I aced it, and they're like, "Oh, you have to wait till you're 18."
Yeah, this is to go in the Navy.
At that point, I had looked at, because I was always like searching classified ads, right? And the Coast Guard had classified ads, you know. So at that point, when I was 17, I was looking at the Coast Guard as for just an opportunity, you know. But I needed a GED, and in Florida, you couldn't take the GED till you're 18. So that just pushed all that out as not an option. So I'd always like wanted to get back to my friends in Plattsburgh, you know, because those were my true friends. I felt like I didn't really make true friends in Florida. So I really wanted to get back there and hang out, you know, with the crew. And so I went back, like, I think right when I turned 18, I went back to Plattsburgh, and I just picked up like odd jobs. You probably remember I was working at Dexter Shoes.
Dexter Shoes,
that's
that? Right. I do. That's right.
You guys showed up one time, and I was like, "Oh, my district manager's here." Like we were a wild bunch. You know, I was like, you don't have to convince anybody of that. So I was doing that, and the thing for me was like everybody else was going to college or seemed to be going to college. I forget, where did you go? You went to Alaska, didn't you?
I did go to Alaska.
Yeah, you were off on your own missions.
Yeah. But that, but the show's not about me though.
Because I wanted to ask about you know, would you drive back a Thunderbird or something? You bought a car, right? I never saw it, but I heard stories about it.
With T-tops.
Exactly. Like, dude, I'm so curious. Like,
we'll talk about that at happy hour after the show.
Okay.
So you're back in Plattsburgh, and then you go to a Navy recruiter, and he says to you, he goes, "Hey, you don't have a high school diploma," and you're like, "Yeah, who cares?" And he's like, "Did you take your your GED?" And I keep saying GSD because I mean that's what we do. We get shit done, right, Justin? Absolutely. Yeah. So you tell him, you're like, "Yeah, I took it."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, okay," but you're like, "I don't have the paperwork."
Yeah.
So then what happens?
Yeah, you know, I feel like that stage of my life, I was like a pathological liar. You know, I was just like a little con. You know, trying to do everything and seize I was like an urchin. You know, and like trying to take advantage of everything. So I was just trying to con my way in, and really the motivation was. All my friends were going to school. You know, Shalette was going to Potsdam, and everybody had a school to go to. And I knew I didn't have a high school diploma. And I was like, what am I going to do?
Right.
You know, like I have to figure out something. So I started talking to different recruiters, and once you make contact with a recruiter, they're just like after you.
Oh, they're
right?
on you.
Yeah,
they're so honest.
Oh yeah, and they're so honest. Like I remember talking to like the national. I remember having a conversation with the National Guard dude, and he was just on me. And at one point, I said, "Yeah, I'm thinking about being a diver in the Navy." And he was like, "Well, you can only do that on your off time. You could never do that for the Navy, you know?"
Right.
And he was trying to convince me to the National Guard, and so that was my motivation because I needed something to do, and I didn't have a high school diploma. I wasn't going to college, and I wasn't working at Dexter Shoes for much longer than that. You know, like I tried everything under the sun, you know, and I just needed I wanted an opportunity is what I was looking for.
And so you talk to the Navy recruiter, and he says, "Hey, you got to take your GED," and you go, "I already took it."
Yep.
And so, and then basically he realized that you didn't take it.
Yeah.
Because they can look it up somehow in the GED book. I don't know how this worked.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, "Oh, I have it, but I got it in Florida." And he's like, "That's no problem. I'll find it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then he calls me back. He's like, "It's funny. I can't find your GED." And I was like, "Oh, strange." And he's like, "Would you take it again?" So I was like, "Sure, I'll take it again." So it was awesome. You know, the military paid me to go to Montpelier, Vermont to take the GED. So I got money to go take the exam, and it happened in like a day, and I had my GED, and then
you aced it again.
Yeah, and it was like they correct it right there, and I was in and out. I got to stay in a hotel for a night, and that was like getting in the military. You had this experience, right? You know, when you start like, wait, I get paid to stay in a hotel?
Yeah, MEPS.
You know, you think
overnight in Albany?
Yeah, exactly. You think staying in a hotel is so fun, right? At that age. So that was my first overnight in a hotel on the military dime, and got that and took the ASVAB, and the ASVAB results came back.
And for anyone who doesn't know, the ASVAB is the aptitude test that you have to take to go in the military, and that's what determines, well, potentially what branch of service you qualify for, but also what job you qualify for in the military.
Correct.
So you could take the ASVAB and qualify to go in the Navy, but they're like, you can only do this job.
Yes.
And so you take the ASVAB, and the recruiter goes, "Oh shit."
Yeah. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
You know, they were kind of pushing for like flying in spy planes or something like that, you know, and that seemed pretty like enticing, you know. I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." And I was at MEPS.
You're like, there's no water involved.
Yeah, exactly. And like a lot of this had like I hadn't even connected the dots at this point, but I think it was there, you know. I was kind of weighing my options and thinking about like cryptology technology was another one that they were pushing.
And this is a while ago, and we don't need to say dates because we don't want to let anyone know how young or old you are, because you look fucking great. But this is before people were talking about this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Way before it.
Yeah.
So at MEPS, I was sitting in the lobby, and some kid had just come out, and he had signed his contract, and we were chatting, and I was like, "What'd you sign up for?" And he shows me his paperwork, and it was a program called the Dive Fair.
What was it called? The Dive Fair?
Yeah, Dive Fair.
Okay.
Yeah, like Wayfarer, but Dive Fair.
Right.
And I was like, "Oh, what is that?" You know? And it was second class diver, EOD, and SEALs. And it was a 6-year contract. So I saw that, and I walked into the meeting, and I asked immediately about that. And the guy's like, "Will you sign up for 6 years?" You know, and
yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. You know, at that age, it's like
6 years, 4 years. That's still a lifetime. I don't care.
Yeah, it's forever. Like in my mind, it's like if I really want to get out, I'll figure a way to get out. Yeah. You know, like
I got systems.
Exactly. My systems are already in place to do what I want. You know,
Dexter Shoe. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that really freaked my dad out. You know, when he came home and saw the 6-year contract on the table, he was just like, "Oh my God, that's a really long time." And you know, you think this and that. And he was worried. I feel like he was worried about it, and because he was in the reserves, and I think he just had a different experience than I did.
Yeah.
You know. And so that made him nervous.
Yeah, everyone has a different experience, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, everyone has to have a different experience.
Yeah.
But I think it was in the MEPS meeting where they were like, "Oh yeah, you know, the guy's like, we'll train you to jump out of planes and shoot guns and dive. Will you sign up for 6 years?" And I was like, "Where do I sign?"
Yeah.
You know, please.
Yeah.
You know, and it was true. You know, like there were some misrepresentations of the truth going through it, but
we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
So you end up going to, because you did boot camp in Florida, right?
Yeah, Orlando.
Which now I think and I'll probably get someone on social media be like, that's not true. But I think now it's only in Michigan.
As far as I know, it's all in Great Lakes and North Chicago, Illinois.
So you did it in Florida. Yep. You graduate boot camp, and then you go to A school.
Yep.
And so for those of you who don't know, A school is your school that you signed up for, like your rate, the job that you're going to do, and which was the EOD job.
Well, it was for me. It was gunner's mate, because at that time it was like you had to go to A school because
right.
chances are you're not going to make it through your whatever dive fair program you're in, second class diving, EOD, or SEAL. Chances are pretty good that you're going to fail out of that at some point. So you have to have something to fall back on.
Right.
So I went to gunner's mate A school in Great Lakes, Illinois, which was a really long A school. I think the clever people chose the shortest schools, like signalman. Yeah, it was like 8 weeks long.
Radarman.
Yeah, exactly. You're like in 2 months of school and you're done, and you're in dive school. But I went to gunner's mate A school, which was 6 months long.
And they taught you all about guns.
Yeah, stuff like you just start on like basic electricity, electronics and electricity, BEE they call it. But it's just stuff that you just like, like you acquire it and then you dump it, It was a good rating. But I think it was a school, like, if I could have gone back, I would have chosen a shorter school.
Shorter school.
It was like, because the most I got out of it was like small arms, the small arms week when you're like the M60 machine gun.
So were you a small arms instructor too?
No, I was never an instructor. I did like when I was in Sicily at the mobile unit, I did have to like attend some trainings for.
Yeah, when I was in Sicily. When I was in Sicily. When I was in Sicily. No, continue. When you're in Sicily, I just love it.
There was a couple times where like it was like the Seabees or something. We're doing small arms training, and they needed someone to like go supervise it, like to be armed and supervise it, which is just ridiculous to me because I would sit there with a 45 on my hip, watching Navy guys talk about small arms, and it's like, what am I really doing here? Like I got an arm 45 and like for what purpose,
right.
Which is ridiculous. So it's not an instructor, but this is as close to an instructor as I got, I think, on that level.
So then you're go to gunner mate school, you become a petty officer, third class gunner's mate.
Yep.
And so at what time do you roll into the dive program?
Okay, so actually I was still a seaman when I graduated.
Don't laugh, Justin. It's a real thing.
Yeah. E3.
Yeah, I was a seaman. Yeah. I was never a seaman apprentice. I graduated boot camp as a seaman.
Oh, were you ever a seaman recruit?
Yeah, well, you go in as a seaman recruit.
Your boot camp is as a seaman recruit,
right? Seaman recruit. And then
when your contract had you as a seaman.
Yeah, because, I had
a full-fledged seaman when you got
fucking seaman, man. I'm an E3. I can wash dishes.
You're definitely full of it, I'm sure.
Oh, I digress.
So I went into dive school as a gunner's mate guns seaman. Dive school was in Panama City Beach, Florida.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And,
do you remember Eric Berry?
No, I don't think so. Doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, I was going to say he ended up going to the Air Force and pararescue.
Oh. Hockey player. Eric Berry. From Ross's Point?
Yeah, no, from Plattsburgh. Football player, like just his nickname was like John Deere. The dude was the fastest fucking guy ever.
Oh shit!
And, anyway,
sounds familiar.
He's retired down in that area.
Oh, nice.
He did like 25 years. Anyway,
in the Navy?
No, pararescue Air Force.
Oh, he was pararescue.
Yeah, nice. And he was the pararescue. They have the elite unit. Anyway, if you're listening to this show, Eric, shout out to you.
Yeah, nice.
He's in flip flops and in shorts right now. Won't even put a t-shirt on probably.
Yeah, he's probably looking at the water.
Yeah. Landlocked.
Yeah. Here we are. Beautiful Colorado. It is beautiful out here, though.
No, it is really nice. Okay, so let's go back. So you graduate A school.
Yep.
And then when do you go to dive training?
So I graduated A school, and dive training was backed up at the time. So it was like a 9-month delay, which is like when you're 19 years old, it's a really long time.
Yeah.
So I was in Great Lakes, Illinois at the Naval Training Center. They sent me back to the recruit training center, which is boot camp. And I worked in the pool, teaching people how to swim, teaching recruits how to swim who don't know how to swim, which was
a joke job.
So much fun. It was just like, it's crazy. It's crazy to me to like think about people who join the Navy. I guess at that time it seemed crazy to me. Now it doesn't.
I still think it's crazy. No, I still think it's crazy. I got a bunch of buddies that are SEALs, and when I hear them, they're like, "Yeah, I started practicing in the pool and learned how to swim." Like, so you wanted to be a Navy SEAL and you didn't know how to fucking swim?
That's crazy.
You joined the Navy and didn't know how to swim? I was like, "Oh, I didn't know I was going to be on a ship." What the fuck did you think you were going to be on?
Well, you know, so much of the Navy happens like
100%, but you don't know that when you're. You just think the Coast Guard. You're like, you join the Coast Guard and you don't know how to swim. It's like, well, I'm actually an engineer.
Yeah, but how often do people in the Navy actually need to swim though? You know, like you get on.
Unless you're a rescue swimmer, not at all.
Yeah, exactly. You get on a boat, and to me, it was always like I spent very little time on a Navy boat. It was always like.
I probably spent more time on a Navy boat than you did.
I bet you did.
Yeah.
The longest I was ever on a boat was 2.5 weeks, and it wasn't even a U.S. Navy boat. It was a HMS out of the U.K. And
the British, the British and the Dutch boats. Oh, they have bars on the boats.
Yeah, dude. It's like the only rule is don't show up to watch drunk, or you have to stop drinking 8 hours before your watch.
Yeah. Even the helicopter pilots were like sitting in the bar, and a guy was like, "Hey, we got an operation in 8 hours," and he's like, "I've got." Shot. I'm like, I don't think that's safe.
I think the hardest drinking I've ever done was on a HMS.
Yeah.
A British ship. And it's like a floating factory, you know?
Yeah.
It's like there's nothing to do on a ship but work. You know? People work 18 hours and you get to sleep for 6 hours, you know?
So throw a bar on there, you're like, huh.
Yeah. What's up with productivity?
Yeah. Okay, so we went off track a little bit there. So you're now going to dive school. You're at dive school. Where are we at?
Panama City Beach, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. Which was super sweet because they were tearing the barracks down. It was spring break, and they put us all out in hotels on the beach, which is actually pretty challenging. You know, when you're going, you have to actually show up for school in the morning. You have to get yourself to school, and you know they like to beat you up a little bit, and then you get off, and then you go out, and you're like wrestling with like, what do I do? Should I take care of my body, or should I go out and like party in spring break?
So we're gonna party in spring break.
We're gonna party in spring break. So it's a good challenge. I think it's a good challenge for a young person.
Yeah. So you're done A school, or no? I guess so. Diving, was that another A school or what?
Yeah, diving's just scuba school. I think like I guess I would call it. I called it dive school. I think everybody calls it dive school, but for EOD guys, it's just scuba training. Really, okay. You do some like surface supplied stuff to get through it, but it's not the focus. It's really to get you scuba trained, and then get you to.
What's the deepest you've ever dove?
Artificially in a hybrid wet pot is I think 190 feet in school. And then out in the wild was a lake in the Netherlands at 165 feet. And that was just pitch black. And, when you go deeper, it feels good. You get nitrogen pushed into your tissues. And it's like
I don't recommend diving in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
We can talk about that too. We might talk about that, Justin.
What if you have any diving horror stories? Those would be interesting.
I have a couple of diving horror stories. But the deeper you go, the better it feels. You don't like naturally have your wits about you. So I think that's the purpose of pushing you deep in school, is to see if you can keep your shit together.
Right.
So
are you doing like math down there?
Yeah, it was just like talking to surface. It was like you go down with a buddy and they ask you a couple questions, and they're just trying to see if you can kind of maintain some decorum. I remember my buddy. I distinctly remember my buddy had never drank alcohol or never had been drunk. So,
and he was your friend?
No, he was my
your
buddy.
swim buddy. Okay.
Yeah, he was my.
Wait a minute. The fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, we didn't know. Yeah, we weren't friends on the outside. He was like my buddy. He was my diving buddy.
He was your swim buddy.
Yeah,
okay.
He was next to me, and he was losing his shit, and I was kind of like giggling, at him. And my response was like, "I'm feeling the full effects of nitrogen right now," and I was like, I felt great. I was like, anytime I'm like deeper than 90 feet, it feels really good to me.
Look at Justin.
It's 90 feet on air. Yeah.
He's just shaking his head. He almost died in Dominican Republic, and we won't talk about that.
Ran out of air.
Yeah,
yeah. That is an interesting feeling when you're really deep and like you go to take a breath and like you get 1/3 of it and everything else just clamps down on you. So I've had that experience. I can empathize with the situation.
Okay, so you're doing NATO operations around the world. I listed a bunch of countries. We were talking earlier before we got on air. There was an incident where there was was it an F-16 or an F-18?
F-18, yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell me that story.
So an F-18 had like taken off from an aircraft carrier, and he immediately had like turned upside down, had some sort of mechanical failure, and as it turned upside down, the pilot ejected himself. So he was maybe 150 feet, 250 feet above the water. So when that happens, he like ejected himself straight into the water. Unfortunately, was like immediately fatal for him. Like it decapitated the pilot, and the F-18 crashed into the Adriatic in 2,700 feet of water with 2 Sidewinder missiles on it.
2,700 feet of water?
Yeah.
So 2 Sidewinders. For those of you who don't know what a Sidewinder is, I know they're about $500,000 to $1 million a piece.
Yep.
But what's a Sidewinder to the listeners?
It's a missile. It's a guided missile.
Yeah.
So super high. I mean, in that age.
Yeah.
You like.
It's the missiles they were shooting in the first Top Gun movie, right? Those were Sidewinders.
Yeah, I wasn't. I wasn't like I had a bunch of buddies who were like in the Navy. When I was in the Navy, a bunch of Top Gun enthusiasts, like singing the songs in the bars just like they did in the movie and stuff. Right. I wasn't that much of a Top Gun enthusiast, but probably the same missiles.
Yeah, probably the same missiles. So okay, so unfortunately the pilot dies.
Yep. And they need 2 EOD guys to go out to the site just in case.
EOD dive guys.
Yep. Navy EOD guys, dive guys. It was my gunner, who's like the highest ranking dude on the team. And then me, at that point, was probably the lowest ranking dude on the team. So we get on the Grasp, the USS Grasp, which is a salvage ship, to motor out to the crash site. And they ended up picking it up with a ROV, remote operating vehicle, because it was so deep. So
2,700 feet.
2,700 feet. So they got the fuselage of the F-18 back on board the ship. They found the Sidewinders, and the Sidewinders were buried up to their tail fins in mud. And the Navy's like, just leave it. Just leave them right there. Which was, at that time, was wild for me, too, because I was like, dude, you're just leaving 2 missiles?
Unexploded missiles?
Yeah. Just 2 pristine missiles.
Yeah.
They're just like,
couple $1 million just sitting at the bottom of the ocean.
And they're like, don't even bother. Just leave it.
Yeah.
Crazy to me.
No, that's fucking wild if you really think about it. Because you got to think about that happened with you. So how many times did that happen? And, unfortunately, it sucks when anyone dies or a pilot, But I think it happens way more than people know.
Yep.
And then obviously the loss of life is, for me, the most important thing.
Yeah.
But then second to that is, okay, are we leaving any kind of secrets out there, or the cost of what we're leaving?
Yep. All the intelligence is right there. For anybody.
But they got to go 2,700 feet to go get it.
It wasn't easy. It's, even when you know exactly where the plane crashes, it's not easy to find that stuff.
No, I know. Like, when I was in search and rescue, we had all our little vector patterns and all of that shit. And it's like...
It's a needle in a haystack, isn't it?
It's a needle in a haystack. And then when you win and you find it, you're like, oh my God.
It's the best feeling. Yeah, it's like Easter, right? It's like, and that was like a big part of our job was like, I was on a mine countermeasure team. So we were constantly...
what was it called?
Mine countermeasure.
Okay.
So it was like underwater mines, like in a wartime situation, you expect the enemy to mine your shipping lanes, to destroy ships. And our whole job was to clear those shipping lanes. So... often we're like given, here's a mile by mile square box in the water. Go find the mines.
Yeah, go find the mine.
Yeah. And it was just like, you never find shit. You're just looking and looking. Like, so when you do find something, you're just like, you couldn't be happier. You know? It was just it's like Easter. It's like, I found it.
Yeah, you found the egg. Yeah. Okay.
Where does a mine, is it like floating, like, is it on the bottom? Is it floating?
There's floating ones. There's ones that are actually in the like I say
bottom
muck.
mines.
I say
Yep.
muck, but
Yep.
it's
That's a good description for it.
But if it's down in the bottom, how's that going to explode?
It depends on how they're triggered, but he can
dude.
tell you. Obviously,
Yeah.
he's a
Yeah.
fucking explosives.
How would that be triggered
expert.
if it's on the bottom?
Dude, it's all up to the technology of the mine and the country who's developing it. So a bottom mine can detonate on magnetic signature of a ship. It can be a ship counter, so like fire on a night ship. It could be acoustic. It's up to the imagination of the developer.
Yeah, and then if you think about it, when a foreign country puts a mine in the water, their objective is to make sure it goes off to the enemy ship.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it's not controlled.
Yeah, exactly. You're like the control, like it gets better. The control gets better and better with technology. Right?
Yeah.
So I think we all have this picture in our head of a mine, like a floating mine with horns sticking off it. Like
So you look at him, he's like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
floating there, and it was like that's a very
Rudimentary.
That was World War II era. You know, they still I don't even want to get into what I know about like current manufacturing because like I'm not the expert on that.
But you are, but we won't talk about it. I get it.
Like like we all know, like in these places, like in Europe, they're constantly digging stuff up. You know, like unexploded ordnance. Like, let's put a playground there, and they start digging up, and they're like, "Oh shit, we just found a bunch of ordnance." You know, and the same thing happens in the ocean. Like, we were just in Turkey doing NATO operations, and we're doing our thing, and we're like, "Oh man, we ran into 5 old World War II moored mines that are just floating there with chemical horns sticking off them, waiting for a boat to run into them." You know, and that's how they're triggered.
Yeah.
You know, so that shit's out there, and you know, it's
And yet you still like to surf.
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I love surfing in San Francisco too. And I was just having this conversation where it's like you sit in the water and you get totally vibed out. You know, you're just like nowhere else. Like I've surfed a ton in Florida. That's where I learned, and it's super sharky there. But nowhere else have I been vibed out of the water like I have been in the San Francisco area, because it's just like. Whether it's all mental for me, but it's just like that's where the great whites, you know, it's a breeding ground for the great whites, and you're out there. There's a ton of coastlines, so sometimes you're out there alone, and you're just like, man, you know, you're not the apex predator anymore.
No.
You know, you're down on the list, and it's like
You are down on the list.
and you don't have very good vision of what's been beneath you. You know, so
Yeah.
it's definitely a trip, but it doesn't stop me for sure.
Okay, so after doing a bunch of NATO operations around the world, you end up leaving the Navy, you end up going to college in Potsdam, you leave Potsdam, and there's some transition around the world or around the country, but then you end up applying for a job in Colorado
Yeah.
for walk me through this.
Sure, yeah. So I ended up in Denver after, like you said, bouncing around a little bit. I was in San Diego and Hawaii for a while.
And I love San Diego, and so does Jonica. We love it there.
San Diego. I would have stayed in San Diego if, like, I had some semblance of a career. You know,
Yeah.
I was like waiting tables,
Or a lottery ticket.
bartending. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was working at a boat rental marina, which was pretty fun because it was like. On your days off, you could just go take any boat out. You know? So
Did you get hired at all? And I'm gonna, because I don't know this. Did you get hired at all to do any kind of diving to clean the bottoms of the boat? And you're like, oh, that'll be fun. And then you're like, you do that for 5 minutes. You're like,
yeah,
fuck this.
yeah. I did it in Florida. Like I went down to visit. My
you
mom.
did?
Yeah, I did it in Florida. I went down to visit my mom for.
And they're like, you're not certified. You're like, the fuck on. Nah.
Dude, I don't even know if they care. It was so funny. It was like they give you an old post office Jeep, you know, to drive around with your scuba tanks, and it was like you said, just it's basically cleaning holes.
Yeah,
you know,
cleaning
like
holes.
swimming holes all day. Like it was actually a really great workout. And I don't know, like I had friends in San Diego who that was their business. That's what they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did it for a short time, and I was like, no, I'm out on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a no-go for me. That's a no-go. You're like, you're not paying me enough.
Yeah.
I'm way more qualified, and not doing it. Okay, so you and by the way, it's getting loud in here because we are at a establishment where everyone's allowed to come in and watch the show and drink and listen. So If you're annoyed by that, maybe editing can get it out. I don't know where Justin went. Right?
He's annoyed by it.
Yeah, he's annoyed by it. I actually like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you end up leaving California and you end up applying for a job in Denver.
Yeah, I was in Denver. I came to Denver because there's just like, running around basically. And my sister was in Denver. She was in the Air Force. She was retired from the Air Force as a master sergeant. So she had a successful career, but she was stationed here in Colorado. And I was couch surfing at her place for a while. So I get here and I start delivering water for Deep Rock Water. So carrying the 5-gallon jugs around.
Is that what made you open up a CrossFit?
Yeah, it's like I should have brought back the water in the CrossFit gym.
Yeah,
as the workout because
I didn't mention that in your quick intro.
Yeah,
you used to own CrossFit Elevation.
Correct.
I still have a couple articles of clothing.
Yeah, nice.
And it was a fucking legit CrossFit, man.
Oh,
it was so good.
The community was just amazing. Like anybody who was part of that community was just like good people, and it was like my heart and soul for so long.
But it goes back to your mentality of like getting shit done. Like because you did that as like a side thing.
Yeah,
like,
that was.
And
my
I don't want
side
to say a side hustle because I don't like that term. But like you were like, you know what? I work out all the time. I'm gonna open up a gym and I'm gonna let other people work out in here, and we're gonna fucking push the limits while you're because when you ended up getting the job, because I'm jumping ahead here, but so you end up getting the job for the state of Colorado, but it's a 2-part job, right? It's amusement park safety regulations, as well as explore. You make the avalanches happen, so tourists don't fucking die.
Yeah, right. All the explosives, any explosives used on the surface in Colorado is regulated through a permitting process. So I manage that program. So it involves.
Because you're the top dog.
I'm the top dog at the state of Colorado. I'm their lead investigator. I'm their expert.
Yeah.
So I got hired because I had explosives experience, and that's why they hired me.
Right. And as they should hire you.
And they hate it when I tell this story, but it's the truth. So I don't mind going against what they hate and saying I was hired for explosives, and then like 3 months down the road, they're like, "Oh yeah, by the way, you're the amusement ride inspector as well."
And you're like, "What does that mean?"
And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, I couldn't tell you one thing about a Ferris wheel. I was so angry, I was like legitimately angry at them, and like, how do you expect me to do this job when I don't know what I'm doing?
Like you'll figure it out. You're pretty smart.
Yeah, they're just like, well, I don't know what to tell you, And just like,
what are you like looking for loose bolts, or like what are you looking for?
Exactly. That's the exact question I had. That's the exact question I had.
You've seen some tragedies in that world.
Yeah,
I know. And I'm going to jump ahead, but we're going to go back.
Yeah.
You are no longer you're no longer doing that. You've convinced the state this is a 2-part job.
Yeah.
And someone else does that job.
Yeah.
And now you are just dealing with the explosives, the training in the mountains, which is your forte.
Yep.
But let's talk about. There's been some tragedies on these fucking amusement parks, right?
Yeah, and it was such a small program. Like when I took it over, or like when I stepped into the program, it was fortunate for me that we immediately, like, I was there for a few months and we got audited by the Secretary of State's office, and that means that they send a team of people who have like lawyer degrees, whatever that is called.
Yeah.
So we have a team of lawyers come in.
Law degree,
JDs or whatever it is. And
who cares?
Yeah, and they're like, and they just rip through all your stuff. They just pull all your files and like basically give you an analysis of how you're doing. And the report came back like, you're doing terrible. Like, you should either do it right or get rid of the program. And it was It was good for me because it was all work that I hadn't done. Like, I was brand new. I was just like handing over the files, and they were evaluating it, and they were saying, nobody's done this job correctly. And I was like, well, okay. And they came back with their findings. They're like, number one, raise fees, because they're all self-funded programs, so we don't get tax money. We run the program off of application fees. So they're like, raise the fees so you can actually afford to hire people, and then run the program right. Like, we had like paperwork wasn't right. There was no checklist. There was no processes. So it was a really good, that report coming back stung the division, but it was perfect for me as a template to build the program, because it was just like, that gave me the foundation to say, these are all my checklists. These are all the things I need to have filed away before I issue a permit. This is how I take enforcement on people who violate the regulations of the program. And then we raised fees, and I accumulated money over a couple of years. And when they finally said, okay, you have enough money to hire somebody, I went to Elitch Gardens, which is the biggest amusement park in Denver, Colorado, and I hired the head mechanic, who was
smart.
30 years. He had 30 years as a head mechanic. He moved the park. I don't know, 1994 from where its original spot was in the Highlands to downtown Denver. And like,
This park that I can see out my hotel window?
that's
that park?
the park.
Okay.
He moved it over a winter. And the dude's a mechanical genius, David Knight, and he's my brother now. You know, we love each other.
So this dude's a fucking wizard, and like he can literally take a amusement park apart and put it back together.
A whole park, a permanent park. You know, it's like,
Wait, you say a permitted park? Does that mean
Yeah.
there's parks that aren't permitted?
right. So the carnivals are traveling shows, right? You know,
Okay.
so traveling shows get like put up and taken down all the time, and they travel around. So every new spot, they put up the rides and they take them back down and they move them. And David Knight was the maintenance director for Elitch Gardens, which was a permanent park. And that was actually like something for him that I think he felt challenged with, was the mobile parks, because he was so used to the permanent parks that
Right.
he felt challenged with the carnival industry, like the people moving around, which, like, hands down, you couldn't find a better person for that job. Like, he's probably like a leading expert in the world on amusement rides, you know, and the state of Colorado just didn't deserve him. You know, he was like,
Are you listening, Justin?
Well, when I think about amusement parks, I don't think about Colorado. That's for damn sure.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you're from Ohio, right? Or you have family from Ohio. Like, you got roots in Ohio.
But it wasn't a bad accident in Ohio recently, right?
Yeah, and Ohio's like got a bunch of amusement rides and a bunch of amusement parks, correct? Yeah, like the East Coast
Cedar
in general.
Point's one of the biggest in the world.
Exactly. Like, there's a huge program. Like, for our program was like, when I started, it was just me. They were like, you're 70% explosives, 30% amusement rides. And I did everything. And when we raised fees and I got money, then I had an admin person, then I got a field inspector. And that's a 3-person team, you know, for all the amusement rides.
And so you're going to like you're inspecting, because Colorado's a big state.
Yeah. Yep. Colorado's a big state. And
So you're like going to like the southeast corner to
everywhere.
what do you say? Durango.
Yeah. All the different corners.
Look at me not knowing Colorado. Just the
Yeah.
southeast corner.
and it still happens today, but it's like, what's an amusement ride? Like, how do you define an amusement ride?
A ride that's amusing.
Yeah, we think of like Ferris,
Those lime scooters.
right?
Oh, those are.
Is that an amusement ride or not?
I mean, I can tell you, emergency rooms have increased with people breaking their necks, faces, and their elbows, and
I have seen, like, we get a bunch of conventions down here, right? And we see a ton of young people. I don't know if it's a cheerleader convention or a volleyball convention, but I saw 2 young girls on a lime scooter, like, skirt death by a fraction of a second, and they were just screaming. And I was like, I don't even know if I had kids at the time, but I was just like, what do you do? I was like one of those people who are like panicking. Like, I was raising my hands to my head. I was like, you know, because there's nothing you could do. You could just watch it happen. It was like a train or a bus.
You can't help anyone.
Yeah, you can't. Like, there's nothing you can do, and you're just like, it was like straight out of the movies where.
So you're going around and inspecting these equipment, machinery. What do you call it? Like rides?
Yeah, we call them rides. Devices is a good name.
So what happens when you have an incident?
We just go in and like
Investigate.
Yeah, we're the state's lead investigators on determining what happened and what went wrong, and did they violate the regulations? You know, was there something that they didn't do that could have prevented this fatality
or
injury.
And you just had a fatality recently, right?
Had a recent fatality in Glenwood Springs. I'm still scheduled for deposition on it.
So we won't talk about it.
So we shouldn't talk about it too much. But
No, we don't have to. We don't have to at all. But so I guess why don't you tell me what you can tell me? And again, if you can't talk about it, we can move on.
Yeah, tragically, a 6-year-old girl died on an amusement ride in Glenwood Springs. And it's just a heartbreaking story, from every angle, and that was our second. We had a fatality in 2018 as well, where it was a young lady. I think she was 20 or 21
So let's talk about her, because that incident's over.
Yep.
I shouldn't say over.
Is the point for liability purposes, or what's the point of the investigation?
The point of the investigation is there's state laws that state how you have to operate your amusement ride or device. So
I think it's scary when he says device.
So we issue a permit to people who are in compliance with these regulations. So in those regulations, we say if someone's hurt to a certain extent, you have to report that to us. And then we do the investigation. And we do the investigation to see, is there any violation of state law? Because it's our responsibility to enforce that. So we go in and do the investigation. We try to determine what happened, how did it happen, is there a violation of state law? So with the 2018 investigation, it was just so strange. We didn't find any violation of state law.
Because sometimes it's truly just an accident, right?
It's mind-boggling, and
because you'll watch the videos for hours, right?
Over and over. I was driving my wife crazy, because she would wake up in the morning and I'd be in my kitchen.
And by the way, she's amazing.
Yeah, and she's a rock star.
She's a fucking rock star.
Yep,
That's
totally.
fact.
Yep, absolutely.
Just thought I'd throw that in there.
I think she's got a diploma for a rock star.
I think she has a degree for being a fucking rock star.
It's a PhD.
It says rock star. She's got if she doesn't have a tattoo that says rock star, she needs one that says rock star.
We're going to get her one.
Yes.
We're going to get her one. Now, the next time we're all together, we'll get one for her.
Yes.
She would get she would walk in the morning in the kitchen, and I was just rewinding the video over and over and over, and she was just so exhausted from it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I was simultaneously the hardest thing that I've probably done in my career at the state of Colorado, but also the most important. The thing you definitely don't want to get wrong.
Yeah.
You just want to your heart goes out to the people, the family. And you see the video and you're just torn apart by it, And the best thing you can do is find the fact.
Yeah, it's about the facts, right?
Yeah, what happened and how are we going to prevent this from ever happening again anywhere in the world?
Yeah,
and getting that out there.
And that's tough, right? And I have a question for you, and you probably can't answer. And I know this is Justin's question because I can see it in his eyes. I don't have any kids. John and I have a beautiful little kitty. Pepe, little 8-year-old cat we adopted. You have 2 children.
Yep.
1.5 years old and 3.5. To correct that, get the age right.
Yep.
Beautiful little daughters.
Yeah.
In a couple years, they'll be like, "Hey," he's already saying no. He already knows the question. Are you letting them go to the carnival?
Yeah,
and ride the rides that you're in Illinois or Montana? Because in Colorado, you're I inspected it, it's good. Yeah. But I mean, are you letting them Daddy, I want to ride this ride, and you're like, fuck that, we're gonna get you some cotton candy.
Man, I'm really hoping to turn them on to other things like surfing.
That's the best answer ever. He's not. He didn't pigeonhole anyone, did he? He's like, I love it.
Dude, I'm so hoping for
anyone who has kids, pay attention to what he just fucking said.
Well, I mean, speaking of that, did you ever go to that surf bar in San Diego that you could surf at the bar? It had a wave pool behind the bar.
Oh,
they had to close it because 2 people died on it.
Was it the Wave Locker?
It was some shit like that.
Was it Mission? It was near Mission?
Yeah, it was near Mission.
Mission Beach.
I never went there, but it was open when I was there, and I never went there.
I don't do
People
any.
died there.
Dude,
I don't do any of that shit.
I've been to Waco. Do you guys know about Waco?
Texas?
Yeah. There's a world class wave pool in Waco. Like one of the best wave pools in the world is in Waco, Texas.
Did you see that one Laird Hamilton just built in the middle of the desert?
No.
Oh, you've got to check that thing out.
What is it? Where is it?
It's in I think it's in Palm Springs, maybe. It's a huge, giant wave pool Laird Hamilton just built. And
Kelly Slater's got one in Lemoore, or somewhere in California.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's $50,000 a day.
Maybe that's the one I'm thinking of.
It's like a train track.
Yes,
right?
that's it. That's the one I'm talking about.
That's Kelly Slater's wave.
That's Kelly Slater, not Larry Hamilton. You're right. Yeah.
Okay, so but it's not $50,000 to use it. That's what it costs to run it.
That's what you have to pay
Get the fuck out of here.
to get the whole facility for the day. Waco, you could just go as an individual, and it's $100 an hour, or right around there. It's probably a little bit
Did you
more
go?
than it. I've been 3 times. I was there for 2 days in a row. One day I surfed for 3 hours, and the next day I had like 5 hours of surfing, and I actually ended up selling an hour because
You were tired.
in the morning I was tired, but then I ended up figuring the wave out a little bit more, so I was conserving a lot more energy. So I was a little bummed that
Perfect waves.
Say that again.
They're perfect waves every time.
They're perfect waves every time.
Yeah, it's like a.
Is it like the Costa Rican surf?
Dude, it's
the endless summer.
it is. It's just like.
By the way, that's a movie, 1979. I love it.
There's 2 of them.
Yes, there is. It's 1979, right?
One of them's probably 1979 era,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
the second
Era,
one's
circa.
Yeah. We don't want to date
someone's going to be. Someone's going to.
Are you old enough to drink?
Yeah, someone's going to go on there, go on the page, and be like, "Hey, you don't know what you're talking about? It's 1982, you fucking loser."
People are going to comment.
Meow. Inside joke, people. Shit, man.
Yeah.
We still got dinner and happy hour to go to. Oh, this is beautiful. So you like the job? You're no longer doing the amusement park rides, inspections or training or.
Yep, I got rid of that.
You convinced the state, basically.
I pat myself on the back for recruiting a very talented young lady to.
No, that's for me. Keep going.
I ended up convincing the state to recruit somebody who had a lot of experience, and she's a brilliant technical writer and just a great person. So I saw her as a potential manager, and they brought her on board for a different program, and then down the road I started petitioning, like, split these programs up, let me focus on explosives.
Okay,
and
because that's what you're good at,
and that's what I want to be good at.
I love it. I do have a question for you, and I'm kind of going back in time a little bit. So I've got a couple buddies, Mark Stoner and Chuck Hall, 2 good friends of mine. I think you call it recreational diving. I was a diver, but these guys are like recreational divers, and they just went to Dubai and did an amazing dive trip. And there's like this cool indoor dive place that's like, I think they filled a shopping mall up with water. I don't really know, but I saw it on Facebook, and these guys were like, it was one of the best experience they've ever done in the dive world. But my question to you is, in your diving experience, what's the most, I don't want to say dangerous, but what's the most scary situation you were in?
Yeah.
He immediately, his eyes lifted up and go, okay. So I don't have to ask the rest of the question. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think for me, it was in the Netherlands. And we did a NATO operation called Sandy Beach, and it was so fun. Like, they put 8 of us. So on a mine countermeasure team, and out of Sicily, it was 8-man dive.
Because that's where you were stationed out of Sicily,
Yeah,
right?
I was stationed out of Sicily, living in Sicily, had a house on the beach, living the Italian experience. And
you speak Italian a little, right?
Yeah, posso parlare Italiano. And like, I would say I had the full Italian experience. Like, I was spoiled in Sicily, and that's why I didn't usually the tours are 2 years. I did 3 years, 3.5 years there because I never wanted to leave. Like, I got out in Sicily, and I was trying to stay there. Or
they're like, you want to go back to Norfolk? You're like,
yeah,
no fuck.
Yeah, dude. I was like, when I got out, I separated in Sicily, which is very unusual. Most people separate back in the States. And I was like, no, dude, I'm staying in Europe, and things just didn't work out for me at the
whatever.
time.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, I get it.
I ended up back in the States, but that wasn't my plan. Like, I love being in different countries, one day I will probably live in a different country. But so anyways.
Now your wife is listening, so and you're gonna say one day I'm gonna live in another country with my wife and my beautiful daughters.
Yeah, my daughters will be surfing, like competitively, hopefully. If I have anything to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. So we're in the Netherlands.
Yeah, in the Netherlands, and we had this. We were messing around. I say messing around, but explosives are just like anything else. They have a shelf life. So when they get past their shelf life, they're no longer usable, or you don't want to use them for the reason they intended to be manufactured.
The intended use, yeah.
Yeah. So you got to get rid of them, and that's a really good training opportunity for people. So the Dutch had this rack of bombs, and forgive me for not being more specific about it, but
you're good.
As
you're
a 23-year-old, my focus was beer and when do we get off? I can start drinking beer, right?
Yeah.
So I remember this rack of bombs, a pallet of bombs. There's probably 14 to 16
that could kill you if they go off immediately.
Yeah, there was just probably 8 pounds of high explosives in each one, and there's probably 16 of them, so for sure.
Just look at Justin's face.
And they just
you would just turn into vapor. Right?
Oh yeah, what we call it in school, or you just turn into a pink mist.
Right.
Yeah.
Pink mist.
Yeah, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't have any idea, but they'd pick you up with a sponge.
Yeah.
So
silence. That's not. We didn't just cut the film, people. That's silence.
So they dropped this rack of bombs into a lake in the Netherlands, and this was interesting. I had to do research on this because I was like, how did that happen? Because the Netherlands is a series of locks and dams, just keep the ocean out.
Right.
So we were in a lake, and they had a rack of bombs, and I'm guessing it's somewhere around 60 or 70 feet. They had a buoy on it, and my job I was the diver. I was the sole diver on the mission. It was to go down and
just get real close to the fucking bomb.
To take this softball of C4. So you get a softball size of piece of C4, and you just shove it in there. You just shove it in the rack of bombs, and there's det cord in there. So the det cord runs to the surface, and we're going to initiate the det cord from the surface. And our rigs at the time, and I don't know what they are now, but they're Mark 16 underwater breathing apparatus.
Yeah.
And it's super high tech, just everything the U.S. military does is probably the best. And no one can compare, right?
Right.
But the problem was it took a while for the computers to come up. So for all the computers on the dive rig to come up was a long time, and the Dutch captain was like, "Hey, you might want to hurry up because they're about to open a dam, and all this water here is about to rush out. So that's a really bad time to be in the water." And we just couldn't get the rig up in time, So by the time my rig came up and I got in the water, the dam was open, the water was rushing out, and they dropped me down current from the buoy. And I'm a pretty strong swimmer. I was probably
you're a great fucking swimmer. You're a black flag swimmer.
I like
in Mexico.
That's my passion. That's my passion to be in shitty water. And they dropped me off downstream of the buoy, and I couldn't kick my way to the buoy. They had to motor back, grab me by my collar, and drag me to the buoy. So I got to the buoy, and I'm hand over hand to the bottom. And I'm splayed out like Superman just the entire time. I'm like, this is never going to work. I get down to the bottom, and I have a piece of twine to try to tie this softball sized piece of C4 off into the rack of bombs.
I watched Tom Cruise do this in a Mission Impossible movie.
Except that was fake.
And I'm down there, and I'm shoving this ball of C4 in the rack of bombs. And I feel like it's all duct taped up, right? And I can feel there's overhand knot of det cord inside the C4.
Literal duct tape? This is the military technology you're talking about?
Oh yeah, literal
the best
duct
militaries is duct tape.
Like Justin's like, Justin, well, you can call it goose tape if you want.
Yeah, it's definitely duct tape.
It's fucking duct tape, man.
In my mind, I can feel like the knot slipping out of the C4.
Oh, shit.
You know? And for me, it was just like...
This is it.
For me, it was just like, is this going to work or not? You know? Because...
Am I getting picked up by a sponge?
No, not even that. Like, it wasn't even that. It was like, am I going to go back and fail?
Yeah, you were afraid to fail.
I was afraid to fail, you know, because not only do I have like eight guys on my team, there's 7 guys.
Well, that's
on my
your everyday GST mentality. You're like, I can't fail this mission.
Yeah, that's like 7 guys on my team and another 8 Dutch divers on the boat. So there's like, what's 8 plus 7? So like 15 people expecting me to succeed.
Yeah.
And I come back up, and I made some mistakes too. As on my way up, I had a diver witness buoy. So they could see where I'm at, and the current was so bad it was dragging that down and pulling me, so I cut it. And then it's like,
let's just cut the safety procedures.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, let's not know where he's at. And in my mind, I was just like, it's just gonna like, I wasn't worried about them finding me or not, but it was just like, this is annoying to me, so I cut that away. And it was almost like at the same time I was surfacing, so they were like picking up the buoy and pulling in and they're like, there's nothing at the end of this. And I was like, oh, I'm over here, you know? And they're like, you cut your diver witness buoy? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, yeah. Jesus Christ, you know? And it was just this whole melee of like, okay, hurry up, let's get this thing on there and initiate it. And we motor back to the boat, and we're all staying on the boat, and the Dutch captain's looking at it through binoculars, and it goes off. And up to that point in time, my experience was like 500 or 600 pounds of explosives going off at 60 feet of water, which was like this huge plume, you know?
Yeah.
You know, it was like, oh, that's awesome. And this was just like probably 250, somewhere around there, high explosives. And when that went off, it was like a much lesser plume. And I was like, did that fail? And the Dutch captain was like looking through his binoculars, and he pulls him down. He's like, it's good.
And then you're like, let's go to the bar downstairs and have a drink.
Dude, for 30 years, I thought that I still failed, and he was just trying to make me feel good. You know? And then like the more time I like rolled it over in my mind, it was like, he had no reason to make me feel good. He's like, that was good.
Especially the Dutch. They're not trying to make you feel good.
No, dude. Nobody's trying to save anybody's feelings there. And in my mind, I was just like, I still failed at that. And I was just like, how could that work? You know, and just like, I think it was like, you probably find this a lot of like people say they're lucky. I feel like I got lucky on that one. And it was just like, it sat with me for a long time.
I mean, listen to the story. It doesn't feel like you got lucky. You did what you needed to do.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Justin on that. So when people say they got lucky, and I'm like, you know what luck is, and you just bought a fucking random ticket and you won. That's luck.
Yeah.
But there's skill involved, and there's talent, and you train, and then all of a sudden you got put in that NATO operation or the operation you had to do, and you took care of business, and the whole time you were doing it, you did it to the point where you cut your safety measures off because you're like, I gotta fucking make this happen.
Yeah.
And I worked with the Dutch, man. I worked with the Dutch and the British, and I know how those fucking guys operate.
Yeah.
With their fucking goatees. And I'm like,
exactly.
Fuck,
rolling their own cigarettes.
Yeah, rolling their own cigarettes. Making their own mayonnaise. Like, put it in the refrigerator. So I get it. Yeah. No, that's fucking solid, man. That's fucking solid.
That was
Justin's over there going, holy shit.
Yeah, that was one of the more interesting ones, you know. I was listening to Justin's story a day ago, running out of air. I was like diving, and we were just messing around. And I had
How deep were you?
60 feet. We were at 60 feet, and we had like, there's 3 of us, and one of the guys wanted to go. He was getting ready to go to Buds, so he was in this like mentality. He was just like,
and Buds for Navy SEALs.
Yeah,
to go to the basic underwater dive school to become a Navy SEAL.
Yep, and he was a lot of EOD SEAL guys go back and forth. I think, you know, I don't know if that's a fair assessment or not, but we call them twin pins. Like if you're EOD tech and a Navy SEAL, you get both those pins, so and you can wear them both. So we call them twin pins. And this kid was wanting to go to Buds, so he was like all into like, you know, being sneaky and stuff. And the other guy was getting out, and he was just like, you know, not really, like, just a mellow dude. So the guy who wanted to go to Bud's was like, hey, let's play this trick on this guy. We're going to scare up a bunch of sand and we'll disappear on him. and I was already getting low on air, but I wasn't too concerned about it. I was just like pretty laid back and lackadaisical, for better use of a term, about like being in the Navy in general. I was like, whatever, dude, you know? So I was like, he scared up a bunch of sand. We were cruising around, and I was like looking at my thing, and I was like, yeah, I'm getting pretty low, but I'm probably fine. And then I was like, I breathed in, I was like, Geet! And it stopped, you know? And I had that moment. It was like,
look at his face.
Yeah,
He's like,
I don't have air, you know? And
you're 60 feet down.
I'm 60 feet down. I'm out of air, and I don't have any air in my lungs at all. So I probably didn't make the best decision at the time, you know, because he, like the other dude, the dude who wanted to go to Bud's was right there too. But I was like, I think I'm out on this, you know. And so
I'm taking your air.
With the physics of diving, right? We talked about this, like air compresses, right? So at 60 feet, as you come up, that air expands in your lungs.
Right.
So I looked at the surface and I was like, I'm just going to slowly ascend to the surface and take my time because I think I can make it. And that's what I did, you know, but it was an interesting experience because like for us.
With no air in your lungs and 60 feet down?
Yeah. So
yeah, he goes, yeah.
So one of the things that I would do, and this is just personal, so I don't know if this is based on science or anything. I have a lot of truths in my life that I've convinced myself that
Me too.
Ended up being wrong.
Self-proclaimed, I call it self-proclaimed. Yes.
So if you blow air out and you see those bubbles rising, for me, as long as I stay below that rate,
right, yeah.
Yeah,
Can't go faster than the air.
Then I shouldn't, you know, have any experience with gas embolisms or, you know, decompression sickness. It wasn't enough, you know, even a worry at that point. So I blew out some bubbles and I just like tracked the bubbles up, you know, and that was pretty common for me. I like to one of the things I like to do is like dive because you can go down as fast as you want. Like that.
Oh yeah.
The rate down doesn't matter. You know, it's like how fast can you go down?
Yeah, unless you're on a Titanic submarine.
True. Yeah, exactly. Unless
Justin just shook his head. He's like, "We're not going down the road." Okay. Too soon. Okay. Yeah.
So you can go down as fast as you want, and I was just like, I would love to sprint to the bottom, and then like do my work really quick. Sometimes it was just like tying a bowline. You know, like how fast can you tie a bowline on something to yank it back up? Tie the bowline and then blow some bubbles and just rise with the bubbles.
I like it. You know, it's funny because I haven't heard the word bowline in a while, like not tying, but I do have a funny story, and I know this is about you, but I've got to share this. So I had this chief, and he told me, he goes, I'm going to show you how to tie the fastest bowline ever, right? And he showed me this little trick to loop it over and fucking pull it, right? And I think it might be a fireman trick, but we used it in the Coast Guard. And he showed me this, and we have like little like fun competitions.
Oh yeah.
And so they're like, it's a knot tying competition.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I might have been a third class. It might have been E3 or a third class. And Chief had showed me this, and I go, oh okay, yeah, like I got it dialed in, right? So we're out on the fantail of the ship, and this is when I was on a cutter. And the competition goes, and like all these bosun mates, you know, like these salty fucking dogs, right? They're like practicing their knots, and what happens is the guy and it's just for fun, right?
Yeah.
It's just you're killing time, right?
Yeah.
And the guy on the little microphone, he's like, okay, he's like, bowling, and I'm like, boom, and I fucking do it, and all of a sudden all these like salty dogs, like I smoked everyone. But full disclosure, I smoked everyone because Chief showed me this little trick.
Yeah, totally.
It wasn't the rabbit around a fucking tree.
No,
trick.
yeah, it's like,
yeah, it was like,
yeah.
And then there's a first class that came around and was like inspecting everyone's bowling to make sure like it held.
True bowling, right?
Yeah, and he was like, and I did it like they were still like They were still like sliding shit through, and mine was done. And you drop it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. You said bowling, so it just made me think of that.
Yeah, that's the one. And really, I know that one. It's probably the same one. Like the.
Yeah, that's what it is.
You pull it over,
and you
slap
flip
it,
and you slap it over, and then you pull from underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the only one I know. I can't even do the regular one.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like we learned like I think it's the 8 basic knots. I had to do them underwater. You have to do them above water. You have to do them under pressure. But I never had to do that in my job though.
Yeah. It never actually comes up.
Yeah. There's like 2 knots I did. Like it was the figure 8 and the bowling. You know?
And the square knot, man.
Oh yeah, the square knot. Yeah.
That's all you need, I think. The figure 8, the bowling, and the square knot.
That's it. Where did Justin go? Did he go get another drink?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm almost ready for another pee break.
Yeah. No, you know what? We're gonna wrap it up. So. Listen, here's the deal, man. You're a fucking everyday GSD guy. And I'm besides that, you've been a friend of mine for fucking years. I appreciate you. I do have a little gift for you. On the show, we give out a T-shirt, an everyday GSD T-shirt. I don't know where. At this point, I don't know where the cameras are looking.
Yeah.
But this is for you, brother.
Dude, thank you so much.
And I want to thank you for being on the show,
dude, man.
And thank you for sharing your stories. I'm proud of you, of your accomplishments, and I want to thank you for everything you've done for the state of Colorado, but for the military and your time. Everything you've done, and as a friend, I just want to say thank you very much, brother. And I'm looking forward to a happy hour later and some good food.
I'm so honored, dude. I love you so much, and it's so good to see you. Yeah, like this is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for making the time, brother.
Fuck yeah.
All right, later. Thanks for watching the Everyday GSD podcast. Episodes come out on the 1st and 15th of the month. If you want to watch people or listen to people that Everyday GSD, please download and subscribe wherever you listen or watch the Everyday GSD podcast. Everyday GSD.